Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the last session of the 2 days conference. Thank you very much. I am very delighted to be walking you through this presentation to start with before handing over to two excellent speakers today. The session is on using data analytics to inform teaching and learning. I'm delighted to be joined on the call today by two wonderful speakers who I know we're going to gain so much from. I've got Donal Palcic and Bo van der Rhee on the line with me. Donal Palcic, as you can see there, he's a senior lecturer at Kemmy Business School, the University of Limerick in Ireland. And Bo van der Rhee joins us from the Netherlands, where he works at Nyenrode Business University. Thanks both of you for joining us today. In terms of the structure for today's session, I'm going to be passing over to Bo fairly shortly for Bo to walk through his experience in this space. And after Bo, Donal's going to take the reins straight away too. We would love for you to kind of get engaged and pop your questions, comments in the Q&A box if you'd like them answered, or just general thoughts in the chat function. So do please keep the conversation going as much as you'd like to. And other than that, I will start by a little scene setting. So I wanted just quickly to look at the kind of different areas that data analytics can shape our teaching and learning efforts. So on the screen now are 5 key areas. I don't think that these are in any way, shape or form exhaustive, but what I thought they would do is just be an interesting set of pillars for us to consider when we're kind of thinking about what Bo and Donal are saying in just a moment. So these are kind of some buckets that Bo and Donal will be exploring, and they're therefore buckets that I thought would be worthwhile flagging as kind of key and integral areas for us to consider. So the first area that I really wanted to look at is how data analytics can shape the way that we monitor progress. So when I mention progress, I guess it's kind of key to define the metrics by which I mean when I say progress. And by progress, therefore, the metrics that I'm thinking about are how learners are comprehending key concepts, how they're building their skills and developing their knowledge as they progress through the course. So data analytics enables us to get great transparency into progress of our learners, which is great. I think it's worthwhile flagging as well, and you'll hear from our speakers in due course, that we're able to look at both an individual level and a group level when it comes to this progress, which is really exciting. The second pillar that I wanted to flag is a pillar around engagement. And engagement is obviously at the crux of a lot of discussion, and I know Bo will talk about this in due course too. But engagement, for me, is kind of held up by slightly different metrics. So engagement metrics may be how much a learner has engaged with a platform, how many times a learner, for example, has attempted to get a question right before getting it correct, how many chapters a learner has read that they're supposed to read, how many quizzes they've taken, and so on. Data analysis enables us to get really good insights and really great transparency into the engagement of a set of learners, or again, an individual learner. And that's really helpful for teaching and learning efforts. Something I'm delighted that Donal will be talking to is how we can use those metrics to start making predictions about our learners and how they're doing. And perhaps it may also serve to indicate where students aren't doing so brilliantly. So where they're not making the progress that we might like them to, or perhaps where they're not engaging, data analytics enables us to very quickly be able to offer support, and remediate and retention, therefore, is my fourth pillar. This is obviously very fundamental to us all as we want to support learners the best way we can. And data analytics really does help us step in at pace and, look to signpost, as Donal will talk to, places that they can gain support from. So that's something Donal will talk to, which is the remediation that data analytics can help with. And that in turn will fold into retention rates, which are also very important and an integral part of this discussion. The last pillar I wanted to look at was how we might utilize data analytics as a motivational tool. Now, this wouldn't be something that came to my mind straight away, but Bo has been kind enough to share his experiences with me in the past, and it's something, therefore, that I wanted to include. So data analytics is also, alongside the other 4 pillars, something that can be used and Bo has used to motivate his learners. And on that note, I would love to hand over the reins to Bo van der Rhee to take over now and walk us through his experience with data analytics. So as I said, please do use the Q&A functionality to ask any questions throughout, because we'll have time at the end. Otherwise, thank you so much, Bo.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. So actually, that's me. So yeah, let me just take a couple minutes to tell you a little bit about what I do and how I do it, just to give you a little bit of background that, again, will hopefully lead to lots of questions and a nice interaction later on. So who am I? Well, I'm Dutch. I'm from the Netherlands. I did my master's at the VU, which is in Amsterdam. And then I went to the US to do my PhD. And then I joined Nyenrode 16 years ago now already to teach. And this is a privately owned business school in the Netherlands, business university in the Netherlands, whereas all the other ones are actually state operated. I like already from a long time ago, I like to do things online, not in the sense of, we all had to teach online in COVID times. Of course, we did that here as well. But more in terms of supporting the learning through online platforms such as Connect and other things that I've done over the years. I've also been teaching in Mexico, in Germany, and in Vietnam. And it's typically courses that students love to hate. And what I mean by that is I work at a business university and I teach things like statistics. That's not the course that students come to a business school for. They come more for, the finance, the marketing, the HR or whatever, but not so much for statistics. But that's the courses that I teach, and I've been enjoying teaching those, actually. And thank you all for saying good afternoon on the chat. That's very nice. Good afternoon to all of you as well. And I've been a digital faculty consultant with McGraw Hill since 2016, actually, in doing all kinds of activities such as this. So how do I teach? Well, here's a picture of a classroom. This was fairly recent. I blurred out some of the faces because they were kind of looking at the camera. But basically, the picture you see in the upper right with the arrow going to the upper right, I already devised that in 2012. I was in charge of an educational innovation task force. And in 2012, I said we should move away from purely offline teaching to more blended teaching. And we should move away from a transfer of information to a stimulation of learning. That was 2012. It's been a while since then, and I've seen, of course, a lot happen in that decade. So I don't do a lot of talking anymore in my teaching. I basically have my students do all the preparation before in a flipped classroom kind of way. And the way that I do that is through several steps. They prepare first some things in Connect. Some of you might be familiar with Connect, some of you might not. I'll show some pictures here later of what that looks like. They also prepare in Canvas. Canvas is the LMS that we're using. You might be familiar with Blackboard or Moodle or something like that, or maybe Canvas yourself as well. So I created a bunch of videos there that they watch. And then we review very briefly in class through some interactive Q&A. I use a software called SendSteps. You might be familiar with Poll Everywhere or Kahoot, stuff like that. And then during class, actually, we're practicing the problems. In this case, you might just be able to see that in the picture. There's a big 2 on the screen there. So that's question 2 that we're working on. And I walk around and help out the students one-on-one or one-on-2 or 3 if they're working in small groups. So the class time is really used as a practice time. And then there's some homework in Connect as well. Now, through all of that, that means that I can keep track of a lot of data. I can keep track of their preparations. I can keep track of how well they practice during class, and I can keep track of how well they practice after class. So that's what I all do. So how do I create the videos? Well, you might be familiar with some of this, so I'll be brief on this, but I basically create narrated PowerPoints. I do that through Camtasia, but there's other software out there as well, Panopto, et cetera, et cetera. And I post those videos in Canvas, and they're always connected to questions, because they always have to answer a question on everything they do in the preparation. Preparation is typically, a little bit bite-sized, so it's short questions, short videos, but always something to do. There's always questions that they have to answer, because again, that gives me data. So that's the video part. Then they're integrated, in my case, in Canvas. Again, for you, it could be Blackboard, Moodle, or whatever. And you can see here there's a video they have to watch, and then there's a multiple choice question. All the questions I use are closed questions. They can be multiple choice, can be multiple answers, drop downs, matching, formula questions, whatever it is, but closed questions, so they get immediate feedback. And this then makes sure that the students actually do the preparation, which is a little bit different from before. And when I say before, I'd say, let's say more than 10 years ago, when we didn't have all these technologies at our fingertips, when we used to just say, okay, well, make sure you read chapter 8. And there's really no way to check if they've read chapter 8. But now I can check because I know that they've watched the videos, they've answered the question, etc. I actually, through a process, which I think I'll call a scientific process, I've established that 15% of the grade should be related to preparation. And this is for, let's say, our full-time students aged somewhere in the 20s. I don't use that so much for, let's say, the MBA or the executive students. I have those at Nyenrode as well, like the 35 plus year olds. They don't really do things for grades, but the 20-year-olds do most of their things at the university for a grade. The first year I did it, I didn't assign any grade to the preparation, so about half the students didn't do them. The second year I attached 20% to the preparation, was 20% of the grade. And then everyone did it, and everyone scored really, really high. So actually that made sure that inflated all of their grades because it was such a big chunk of the grade. So the third year I did 10%, and then again about a third of the students didn't do it because they thought, oh, it's only 10%. So I finally landed on 15%, and then all the students do it. They get reasonably high grades for the preparation. I always have them do it. I always allow them to do it twice, and the average score is kept. All of those kinds of tricks you can do. And with 15%, even though the score is high, it doesn't influence the grade that much, but they do prepare. So that's how I landed on the 15%. I think if you go for 13%, it would still be fine as well. Anyway, then I use all of that to check the data, and also I work in Connect. Now, what do I do in Connect? Here's a quick overview of Connect. And for each of the chapters, again, this is on a statistics course, but it works just equally well on an economics of finance, or any kind of course that has anything to do with numbers. If you do more qualitative things, you can also use this kind of method, if you will. But then it's a little bit harder because it's fairly simple to change questions, just change some different numbers. But qualitative questions, it's a little bit different, difficult to change those numbers because there aren't any numbers, so you have to really rewrite the questions. So for my statistics course, for each chapter, I always have 3 entries. There's a smart book, which is something that they do before the class. There's a practice, which is something we do in class. And there's a homework, which is something we do after class. And the practice questions is what you saw on the previous slide. You saw the students working on a practice question. And the smart book, again, they do in the preparation. And the homework they can do afterwards. So that's how I work through that. Here's a question on the smart book. So again, this is something that students would do before class. This is all in Connect. And again, all closed questions. They have to answer on several different concepts. You can see at the top it says 0 of 7 concepts completed. Each concept they need to answer 2 questions correctly. And what's really interesting about this software is that it also forces them to rate their confidence. At the bottom, you can see high, medium, low. And the questions are adaptive in the sense that if they get the right answer and they rated their confidence as high, so correctly, then the next question will be a little bit more difficult. But if they got it wrong or they got it right, but they indicated that they were low confident, then the next question will be a little bit easier. And so basically for every student, this is a little bit different. It's adaptive. And so I don't assign a grade to this per se. I just say you have to complete this. So you have to get 100% on this. And then you go to my videos and you do multiple choice questions on those. And that's then for a grade. So basically this unlocks that option. Okay. So there's that. And then the practice question, this is a typical practice question. This is, I think, even the same one as I showed in the picture just now. This is question number 2. And again, it's a closed question. They have to answer put some numbers in those brackets. And I help them out. I walk around and help them out. One of the main mistakes I made when I first started doing this, I would do 10 of these questions in a session. We typically do sessions of 3 hours with a break somewhere in the middle. And I used to do 10 of those questions in an hour. That's just too many. Now I do like 4 or 5. and really make sure that they understand what's going on there. Then they do some homework after, and this is not mandatory. And that brings me to the final step in the analytics, and also, as Rachel was saying, the motivational part. The homework is not mandatory. It's not for a grade. They do it or they don't do it. But why would they be interested in doing it? Well, let's take a look. I track the performance in two ways. Number one is I track the performance at the question level. And here's just a quick example of 3 questions from a particular chapter. And you can see all of them are doing really well. The best assignment attempt scores over 90%. In that case, I say, okay, good, you got it. Let's move on. But if there's any question that scores below 70%, I dedicate an additional bonus session to this, which is a 15-20 minute session I just do through Teams or Zoom. I record that session. Usually only about a third of the students show up to those sessions, but that's okay. I record it and I post it, and in those sessions I do the difficult questions. So that's what I do throughout the whole semester. But I do something in addition to that, and that is shown on this slide. I'm almost getting to the end here, because just at the moment that the students are taking the final exam, I take a look at their online engagement indicator in Connect. And the online engagement indicator basically is a score between 1 and 10, showing to what extent they have been engaged and to what extent they've answered the questions correctly, or how many attempts they took, exactly as Rachel was mentioning. And I do that every time at the moment that students take the final exam. And then I track, of course, okay, how well did they do on the final exam? So in this scatter plot, you see on the x-axis at the bottom, you see the online engagement indicator score. And on the y-axis, the one on the left there, from 0 to 10, that's the exam score. And in the Netherlands, you need to have at least a 5.5 or a 55% to get a pass. But of course, you'd like to get a higher grade than that. I also keep track of all kinds of other stuff like gender, age, background. Are they Dutch or are they foreign? We have 2 locations, so I compare the different locations. I do all kinds of regressions on this. And basically, the only thing that ever comes out as significant is the online engagement indicator. Some groups, the males do better. Some groups, the females do better. Most groups, the older students perform a little bit worse than the younger students, but not significant. The location doesn't matter. Whether they're Dutch or foreign doesn't matter. Of course, what does matter is their previous education. If they've done some statistics previously, they tend to do better in my statistics course. But everything else basically is not significant, except for the online engagement indicator. Now, what do I do with this graph? I actually show this in the very last session of the course, because the course is on statistics, and the last topic on my statistics course is regression analysis. And I have them basically work through an Excel file that's just labeled as X1, X2, X3, X4. So those are things like gender, age, background, and then there's the online engagement indicator. But I don't say that that's what it is. And then I have a variable that's Y, and that's, of course, the dependent variable, and that would be, in this case, the grade. Okay. So they run the regression, they find out, okay, the only thing that's significant is this X3 or whatever it is. And then they're really happy. They're, okay, I did it. And then I say, well, what is this data? And they slowly start to figure out, oh, wait a minute, this is something about grades, isn't it? And it turns out that this is the information from last year's cohort. Because, of course, for the current cohort, I don't have the final exam grades yet because the exam is in, let's say, 2 weeks. But this is the final session before the exam. So I use the data from the previous cohort and I show them through the data, and I have another one right here. I show them, yes, indeed, if you practice, you're going to do better. This one is a little different because on the y-axis here, it doesn't show 0 to 10. It shows 0 through 30 because this is a different group. They get 30 multiple choice questions, and it's just about the number of multiple choice questions you get correct. Here, the cutoff is 19. So you see a big green arrow above the 19 and a red arrow below the 19. And here we did also an analysis, and you can see that for the students with a lower online engagement indicator, about half of them fail. And if their online engagement indicator is higher than 4, then 5 and 6 pass, so 1 in 6 fails. So we go from a failure rate of basically 1 in 2 to a failure rate of 1 in 6. Now, are there outliers? Yes, of course there are. There's a really sad one here at the far right. Did everything possible in Connect, but still failed. And there's some other outliers more on the left with low online engagement indicators, but still passing the exam. Okay. So there's always outliers, but the general message is very, very clear. If you practice, you're going to do better. Now, I saw a couple of questions here in the chat, so let me take a really quick look here from J. Paul. Really excellent strategy to motivate and engage students. Yep, I agree. And also financial reporting, absolutely possible. And that's it. Okay, I didn't see any questions. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. So I think I'm going to hand it over straight to Donal.
Thanks very much, Bo. I'm instantly regretting having to go up second after that presentation. I'm similar enough to Bo in that I also teach subjects in a business school that students love to hate, because I teach economics to our undergraduate business students. I teach at a master's level as well, MBA in the past. But what I'll focus on in this session is my approach to teaching my first year in particular, undergraduate business students. And it's a very, very large class. So, this year would have been 650, this even more, I think, in the previous year. And, for these students coming in, they're in a huge auditorium in the concert hall in our university here in Limerick. They're just out of school where they're used to class sizes of 25 to 30, the teacher knowing their name, all of those types of things. And then suddenly they're looking at me up on a stage in the distance talking about economics, and it's a very, very tough transition. Before I get into that, just to give you, a little bit of background. So I'm a senior lecturer in economics here in the University of Limerick in the business school. I've been teaching here since 2004. I also teach abroad a lot, particularly in French business schools, Odense and Nantes, Grenoble, Strasbourg. But for those types of modules that I'm teaching, there tend to be smaller group, older students, and I don't use the same type of techniques with these students that I'm going to talk about here. So Bo already went through how he uses Connect. I actually use it in a very, very similar way. So I'm not going to walk through the different things that I have. The main thing I've found is, over the years, I've used different platforms, had different ebooks, different systems. And in the past, if I'm being honest, I probably would have just assigned different things and not really paid attention, just said, look, we're doing this topic this week. Here's the related chapter. Maybe there's an assignment that you put up, whether they do it or not is their own issue. You'll have a test online, I suppose using the online tools, but not in a very systematic, very coordinated way. And it's only in recent years, maybe starting in about 2017, that I started obviously paying more attention to, well, they have all of these e-resources, how are they using them, and looking at the statistics, and then a bit of learning by doing and trial by error, but essentially trying to find the best way of structuring it. How am I going to engage them out of the classroom? So they only get 2 hours with me a week in lecture halls. Then they have small group tutorials for an hour with one of my TAs. But to try and engage them out of the classroom was my goal, and particularly online. So whether I upload different kind of extra videos or video walkthroughs on different topics, whether I'm giving them homework assignments, I use Connect as well, like Bo. But one of the major things I started doing was making assigned readings something that they had to do, because I could see that they weren't doing these readings on related topics and they weren't really engaging. They might just log on whenever there's a test or whenever there's an assignment, so very little engagement. And I wanted more systematic engagement to get them into good habits. So I started structuring it that there was an assigned reading every single week, and the completions of those readings actually added on as a weighting for their whole continuous assessment. If they do all their weightings, they get 100% of whatever they got on their continuous assessment. If they only do half the readings, they'll only get half that amount. So very much kind of incentivizing them that they have to do this. And then making sure in lectures that, look, I'd be showing the stats each week and saying, here's how many have completed the reading. In your tutorials next week, you're going to be working through problem sets and different things based on this. You've got a homework assignment based on this topic. So every single week they kind of know we're going to be doing a new topic. There's a reading, there'll be homework. It's going to feed into a tutorial the following week, and the week after that, there'll then be an online quiz, an online test based on that content. But it's not like I just, the very first time I decided to do that, created that kind of a very well structured model. It's only, as I said, from learning by doing and tracking engagement over time that allowed me to see, okay, well, what's the best way of getting them to engage with readings, engage with the online content, and have that feed in to what I'm doing in classes and what my TAs are doing in their tutorials. And then obviously the feedback loop in terms of we're constantly monitoring that and saying, okay, a bit like Bo showed, if there's a question where they're getting less than 60, 70, 60% in a test or an assignment, I'm then able to get my team of teaching assistants to work back through that content, and I'm able to bring it up in lectures if I need to, or post a video if I need to as well. So one of the key things I'm always looking at when I'm using Connect would be that online engagement indicator that Bo talked about is a key metric there, and that helps, the green there, the students that are engaging and they're, relative to their peers, they're doing all their readings, they're completing their assignments, they're doing their tests, etc. The orange are ones that are maybe not as engaged, and then the red are obviously the ones you'd be worried about, and that they're really, really not engaging, not completing readings, maybe not even doing a test. And at different points of the semester, anyone who's in the at-risk category would be getting emails from me checking in to see, is there something up? Do they need extra support? Those types of things. It's a really good way of tracking how they're doing. And I have a chart that's very similar to Bo's there in terms of the online engagement indicator from 1 to 10 that's taken from Connect versus their overall performance. Of course, you're going to have lots of different outliers in that simple correlation, but a very clear trend in terms of the more engagement online with your readings, your assignments, your tests, etc. Unsurprisingly, the higher your mark will be. And I show students at the beginning of every year and during the semester these kind of charts from previous years to really hammer home the, getting into good habits, engaging with this material. It's only going to help you do better in the module. Like Bo, that's a very, very basic correlation. And because I'm in economics, we like playing around with data. So we have run lots of regressions on, just is it just online engagement or what are the other things? So we thankfully have a lot of administrative data around prior ability. We know exactly what the results were from their secondary school, their high school here in Ireland. We know what subjects they did. We know what grades they got in those subjects, whether they did economics or even a maths stat, what kind of level of maths or stats they had, because that often helps you in economics, gender, etc., etc., etc. And we run regressions where we control for all of those to see, what's significant and what's not significant. And very much like Bo, that online engagement and the assigned readings engagement came out as significant, particularly when we looked at the distribution for the kind of the middle students. The top students were pretty much always going to do well. There's some students in such a large group, 650, there's always going to be a certain percentage of those that, for whatever reason, aren't engaging, aren't going to do well. But we saw the most significant improvement for the, everyone around the middle there, in terms of the more they engaged, the more significant the impact on their results. And again, we present this to students to show them, look, we've done this analysis. It is in your interest to engage as much as you can. The last thing I'll talk about is this year I was part of a pilot project in the university. My module and only I think one or two others in the business school would have been part of this pilot, particularly for first year students, because it's always, as I said earlier, a tough transition, but it's been even harder, I think, post-COVID. In Ireland, because of a kind of hangover from COVID, there's actually been big delays in them getting their results from their secondary school exams, their final exams, which then delays their entry into college. And in the last 2-3 years, and even coming up next year, first years are starting in our 4th week of teaching. They should be there from week 1, obviously. And they're actually getting a truncated only 9 weeks of teaching. So normally I'm obviously trying to get them engaged, trying to get them up and running in college life, and then obviously learning something about economics. But in the last couple of years, I've only had literally 9 weeks with them, and it's a very tough, as I said, transition. So This project was a very good one in that it looked at all of the previous year's results and the VLE stats, connect activity, performance, controlling for all of the things we talked about earlier, their gender, their prior ability, what subjects they've taken, but basically, analyzed all those results and then was able to create a predictive model based on student engagement and activity, etc., online in terms of how well they're going to do on the exam, using all of the previous year's data. And what that allowed us to do was midway through the semester, we were able to look at the activity stats, so the number of readings completed, number of assignments, the number of resources accessed, all of those types of things that we have easily to hand on the module as it was at that point in time, and compare that to all of the previous years and be able to model that and say, there's this cohort of students that are, at risk, they're not engaging. And based on previous years, it looks like if they continue in that direction, they're going to fail or they're going to do very, very poorly. So it's not a perfect model. It can't capture offline study. It doesn't capture lecture attendance if it's in person. But that online engagement in the previous years was shown to be very significant anyway. So it still tells you something. And what we were able to show, was that even just looking at readings, the assigned readings that they have to complete on the platform, you're kind of splitting them into high engagement, high performing, medium performing, and low performing students over the years. You can see those that were not performing well in the module also tended to be the ones, unsurprisingly, not completing that many readings compared to the other cohorts. So that was a very useful pilot project to be a part of, because I'd obviously explain all of this to students and say, look, this is what's happening this year. They're constantly hearing me talking about the importance of these things anyway, but I'd be showing them these types of charts saying, look, there's other things that can influence your performance on the module, but one of the main ones that we found in the past is online engagement. You're going to be getting a communication soon saying where the model is placing you in terms of, are you very at risk? Are you kind of, middle, or are you kind of in the safe zone, if you want to call it that, and just keep doing what you're doing? It wasn't perfect in that you're going to have students that the model is putting in the wrong category. They might, for whatever reason, maybe they're doing a whole pile of offline study and they're actually going to perform well. They just haven't been engaging online, and there's no issue with them. And vice versa. Somebody who could be doing all the readings, everything, and actually performs very badly. Of course, there's going to be outliers. But the real benefit I found was the students, because I talked through this in class and said, I'll be emailing you all. If you need extra supports, if you need something, you just need to get in touch. And I was able to put on extra tutorials that I delivered myself. I think I ran a number of them. My TAs put on extra tutorials for students that felt they were really struggling and at risk. And I suppose using that data and then engaging with the class and telling them what we were doing and why we were doing it, and then reaching out and saying we have supports in place. What we saw afterwards was, a big jump in engagement on the online platforms. The number of readings completed, everything kind of ticked upwards. Once all of that communication happened at the midway point, performance improved, and then we obviously put on all of those extra supports outside of the classroom as in terms of extra tutorials. And I don't know, I suppose if you're one of 650 people in a class, there's probably an element of them feeling like, somebody's paying attention, somebody cares as well, because it can be quite an impersonal kind of, seems like we almost don't care about them when they're one of just a sea of faces in front of you. So it was a useful pilot project. I'd kind of been working on different, analytics like that before anyway. And I was able to feed into the university team on, my experience of all of this. And so it's definitely given me food for thought for next year in terms of how we might run it a little bit better, maybe get different attendance data as well, which we could try and track, and maybe build in engagement in class, because a bit like Bo, we often have tests or little assignments quickly in class, not on Connect, but using things like Kahoot or Mentimeter or whatever. And if you could start building in that as well, again, it's just giving you a bit more data and a bit more predictive power. So that's my kind of rant finished. Hopefully that was okay. And yeah, I'll kind of hand back, I think it's to Rachel or somebody to moderate the Q&A if any have come in.
Thanks so much, Bo, and thanks so much, Donal, for those wonderful presentations. Absolutely loved hearing from both of you. We are going to dive into some Q&A now, if that's okay with you both. There are some excellent questions in there, so I'm excited to do that. I wanted to kickstart.
I've been answering some of those, if you don't mind.
I'll have you. Oh, amazing.
Yes.
Perhaps wanted to kickstart with something Donal wrapped up with, which was where he was planning to kind of take the data analytics piece next. Bo, how about you? How are you thinking about data and taking it forward with your course?
Well, you actually hit on a bit of a sad point for me because I'm no longer teaching that course. I handed it over to a new colleague. But basically, I think I got to the end of what I wanted to do with it, in the sense that in the last couple of years, starting with COVID actually, I made some of the assignments in Connect more mandatory, kind of like what Donal was also talking about. Because letting everything be like, oh, you can do it whether you want it or not, I still got the results. I still showed that if you are more engaged online, you're going to do better on the exam. But basically what it allowed me to do when I made things more mandatory is that it allowed me to push, kind of like what Donal also was saying, there's always going to be 2 or 3 students. I have smaller classes. There's always going to be 2 or 3 students who just don't want to engage, which was also one of the questions on the chat. What do you do with the students who are just not engaging whatever you do? Well, too bad for them. I can't help them. But what I can do is make sure that there's no threshold to be engaged. So I can remove the threshold from being engaged by making it more fun, making it more accessible. And by doing that, by making also some things more mandatory, because we all know how this works. If you have a deadline, you're going to do the work. If you don't have a deadline, well, I can do it next week, or maybe just not. So if by imposing some deadlines, by imposing some mandatory, obligatory assignments, what I noticed was that the online engagement indicator increased, and therefore also the grades increased. So by just a little tweak, not making everything mandatory, but just some basic things. For example, what I did was the smart books. Donal talked about making the readings mandatory. Just by doing a couple of those little things, incentivizing them to actually do the work, we see that grades are increasing.
I love that. Thank you both. Thank you both. Sorry. And one of the questions that I was particularly taken to in the chat was this idea around time management and how frequently you guys are reviewing that data and how you kind of squeeze that into, your busy schedules.
I already answered it on the chat.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I already answered it on the chat. It basically takes no time at all, to be honest, because the system does it for you. I don't know, Donal, maybe you have a different take on this, but for me, it's like 2 minutes. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, in real time, looking at their engagement online, it's exactly like Bo said. It's a few clicks and you get your report. The only bits of data that would take you time would be getting all of their kind of, I would call it the administrative data around, their gender, all of their previous results. You'll have to get that from somebody. I just get somebody to get it for me. That maybe is a little bit more work, but the real-time data on what they're doing, it's just a touch of a button, and you have your report easily downloaded as well.
Yeah, same experience here, and indeed, when the graphs that we both showed, that means you need to match at least 2 sources of information. In my case, 3, because you have your Connect data, you have that administrative data, and then you have the final exam data, and you have to match up, per student. Okay, is this student A? Is this his grade? Is this his gender? Is this his age? Is this, so you have to match all that up. And as we know, the data from different sources doesn't automatically perfectly match up. So that takes a bit of time. But for me, I was happy to put in that time because not only did it allow me to do some analyses on this exam, it actually created for me the content that I used next year. So for me, that was not that's only like an hour or so. And the real time stuff, like a click of a button, 2 minutes, and you're like, oh, okay, this question, fine, done. Yeah,
the same for me, matching up the things. But again, maybe it might be slightly easier if you're in economics or statistics and you're used to coding. I have a code that'll literally do it at this stage. the very first time I had to do it took a bit of time, but now it's fairly automated.
That's great.
Fair enough.
That's something I think that will resonate with people, that it's speedy and, you know, takes a tiny bit of time to start with, but once you're set up, it's very efficient. Another question we had was around particular challenges. So I'm going to ask in a really broad capacity, you know, what challenges perhaps you faced. It could be that it was from students, it could be perhaps from colleagues, just a high level, how you kind of countered any challenges along the road. Bo, how about
not
you?
So much. Yeah, it's for me, not so much with things like Connect. The major issue for me was actually to create all the videos for the flipped classrooms. And that's actually a question I also see here by J. Paul. He says, how do you embed all the videos and determine the statistics? What best strategy would you suggest? Well, before we had Canvas, we were just using SharePoint. And that meant I had the videos on like a separate server. And then I had to have one of our secretaries look at each student. Okay, did they log in? Did they check the video and all of that? But if you embed it in a question, in a quiz, either in Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, you just make it into a quiz question, then it's automatically tied to that student. And automatically you can see if they've answered the question and what score they got on that question. So then again, it becomes kind of similar what we were talking about earlier about the real-time data that just comes out of the system. So that was, for me, in the first couple of years, that was a big challenge because we didn't have such a nice system. Also, of course, creating the videos, that's a big challenge. But the university doesn't tell me that I can't do this. They just tell me they're not going to pay me more if I do all of these extra things. But in the end, setting up the system right takes a lot of time, but you benefit from it year by year by year. And so my main recommendation, I guess, if you're thinking about doing any of these things, start right away. You are going to fail the first year. Like with me, I didn't make the preparation a graded element of the course, and half the students didn't prepare. Well, there goes the flipped classroom out the window, right? But basically, you're gonna make stupid mistakes. Hopefully, you can learn from the mistakes that we've made, and you can talk to some of the DFCs who have gone through all of these things. But start right away. The first year is going to be painful, and years 2, 3, 4, 5 until N, you're going to benefit. And that's the major thing. And that's also another question I saw as well. What do colleagues say about this? They kind of look at it like, oh no, then I have to learn a new system. Oh, it takes me how do I set it up? And yeah, no, that's taking me too much time. It will take time year 1, but you will earn back that time in year 2, and from year 3, you're benefiting. How about you, Donal?
Yeah, no, in terms of the online stuff, I have a very similar, exact same experience as Bo. I mean, I suppose my biggest challenge right now, it might just be an Irish specific thing, is post-COVID, once we're back in person, which we have been since last year, lecture attendance has been shocking. It's been very, very low for first and second, any kind of year I teach. And me trying to deliver these messages around engaging with the different things. And if you do this, this, and this, if I'm only talking to usually half my class, and then you obviously can email, you can do whatever, but a lot of my colleagues are under pressure to say, well, do you record lectures and put them up, or do you have different things? And in the past, when I've done that, had a in-person and online, then in-person just collapses down almost to nothing. And then when you look at the online videos, they're not even watching those. So I'm finding that actually one of the biggest issues in terms of, there's a housing crisis in Ireland, and it's, there are issues explaining some of the facts why students might not be turning up, but not all of it in terms of the engagement. And it's the one where I used to worry about the online out of classroom engagement. Now I'm actually worried about how do I get them into the class and just have them there so that I can engage them there and reinforce all of the other messaging around the importance of doing the different readings, etc., etc., etc. So that's the big issue I'm facing. I don't have an easy solution to it, and I'm hoping it's some kind of post-COVID hangover, and that things will revert to a more normal situation in the future. But yeah, it's not an easy one to deal with. I'm only talking about really this year and last year in particular.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing similar things at our university, but not on such a scale, because our biggest classroom has like 60 students, but sometimes only 25 or 30 of them show up. And so then we're also missing half, but we're not missing 300. So that's a bit of a different perspective. But I think one of the reasons for this also is that students have become used to, oh, you know what, I'll just watch the session later. I'll watch it online later. And then, of course, they don't do that, because how are we going to force them to do it, right? Or they play it at 2 times speed while they're playing a video game. Okay, well, wonderful. But then you don't actually take in the learning that you would have taken in if you've come to the classroom. So that's also that is something, and we have a variety of solutions implemented at our university. The simplest one is that one of our program managers actually takes attendance, and in our bachelor students, there's actually a threshold. If you miss more than 1 in every 8 sessions, I believe it is, you just fail the course. That's it. But as a professor myself, I am actually not in favor of that solution, because that means that I get students in the classroom who are totally not interested in being there. So I always tell my students, if you're not going to make it to class, you're going to miss me more than I'm going to miss you.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, the post-COVID hangover. That was one of the questions in the chat. Another one's just come in. So, Bo, I don't believe you'll have got to this one just yet. It asks, do the platforms identify the reasons for the lack of engagement?
Yeah, I was reading that too by Parisa. Very good question. And basically, the answer is no, as far as I know. But this also, I also teach operations. I teach lean management, Six Sigma, all those kinds of things, statistical quality control. And I always tell my students in those things, the statistical quality control will never tell you why something went wrong, but at least identifies that something went wrong. And that's the same here. We can look at the online engagement indicator. We can see that some people are less engaged. We don't know why. The system doesn't say, well, they're looking for a house, or they just gave birth, or they just changed job. But it does show that they haven't done the work that they were supposed to be doing. And that then allows us to follow up. And this is vastly different from, the before, where we just never know. Until they take the exam, we just don't know what they're doing. Now, during the class, during the course of the semester, we can see, okay, you're not engaged. Let me reach out to you. And I think that's what you're doing too, Donal, right? You're sending them emails and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the online engagement indicator, it's a measure it's relative from the most engaged to the least engaged person in your class, but you can dig a little bit under and just pull their entire report down and see they missed these readings, or they missed a test, or you can even get a time spent, I think, number that tells you something. So you can figure it out. But yeah, the main thing is, when you see that there are students that are really not engaging, the intervention is the critical thing there that has to happen.
Yeah, and it allows you to do that, right? That's I think the main point.
Yeah, and
it
before,
allows you
like you said, you'd never have seen it. Yeah. Yeah,
and that's what I do also during my classes with the students, and particularly when you do the flipped classroom and you're walking around. I know, because again, my classroom is a lot smaller, right? It's like 60 students. But I know that 10 students or so who are struggling. So I make sure that I visit them a little bit more often than the 20 students that I know are going to be fine, right? And I just go by and say, hey, I see that you were struggling with this. What's the problem? Can I help you? And then they're like, oh, wow, you know this? Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah, I really was struggling. And if you don't know, you can't intervene.
Yeah, no, same. And I can see a question from Gita there. How have students fed back more qualitatively? I mean, I have, obviously, we've mandatory kind of teaching evaluations, and I get decent enough scores. If I get the qualitative comments on that, and sometimes I specifically survey students around how they find the readings, the majority like the thing. There is a vocal enough minority that say they don't like the readings. They can't see not every student in a group that size is going to like doing this. Sometimes they'll say, oh, there was something in one of the chapters that isn't related to something you talked about in class, even though I tell them, it's a book chapter. You're going to maybe have different bits and pieces that I haven't covered in class, but the point is you're you're reading and you're learning about something related to the topic, you get those types of comments back. But the vast majority, anytime I've ever surveyed it or get qualitative comments in teaching evaluations, have always said that they found the system good in terms of getting them into good habits. And I actually get them in second year as well. So a cohort that I have in my first year, I also teach in second year, but I only teach half that module with a colleague who takes over for the macro, who doesn't use Connect. And if I compare the engagement with my first years and second years across the 2 years, it plummets. They're not doing readings, they're not doing anything because and I've actually had them say I kind of miss the systematic type of approach that was there. Now it's more up to me, and sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. So some people may not like being forced to do things, but I think most of them are kind of, if you ask them, can see the reason why you're forcing them to do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the word macro there, and I think you are referring to macroeconomics.
Yeah.
But I would interpret it even in a slightly different way. At the macro level, each student is there to learn and to get a degree and to, to better him or herself. And at the macro level, they actually would probably say, well, I want you to force me to do these things. But at the micro level, at the day-to-day level, they don't want you to do that, right? Because at the day-to-day level, they just want to get an easy A, as we would say in the US. We want to get an easy A. But if we do that, if we just, we give them all A's or whatever, you give them firsts in Ireland, or we give them tens in the Netherlands, in the end, you're not helping them. Exactly. And by being a little bit of that strict teacher to say, okay, you need to do all these things, I get the same qualitative feedback. The feedback that is most often given to me is something like, well, it was a lot of work. It was getting used to doing all this work, but in the end, I actually learned something, and that's really valuable to me.
Thank you both. Bo, I had a question in the Q&A from J. Paul, which asks quite a technical question around the videos that you've utilised. They've asked how they would embed
that one we
it.
did discuss. Yeah, we did discuss that one. So that one was basically, just embed them in either Canvas or in Blackboard or something in a quiz. Make sure that it's a quiz. Because because I think maybe the point is, if you just post a video in, like, let's say an announcement or something, you don't know if they actually watch it. You don't know what they're doing. But what you need to do is make it into a quiz. So you have a video and then attach a question to it, or even multiple questions, and make sure that's graded. Then they do it.
That's great. I'm glad we answered that one. Thank you. Well, I can't see any further ones in the Q&A that we haven't answered, which is great. I think we've had a load of absolutely great questions to cover there. I believe Geeta will be rejoining us in but a moment. So yes, just want to
I'm also scrolling through, but I think we covered most of them. And I also was typing some answers while Donal was presenting, because I had seen his presentation before and not because I wasn't interested. But I think we did most of them. If not, then always feel free to reach out. I assume that the slides can be shared too with the audience, Rachel?
Yes, absolutely. I know that the marketing team will be on top of that.
Perfect. And both Donal's and my contact information is in there. So if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to reach out.
Yes.
That's at least for me why I do this, to get in touch with other educators around the globe and see if we can learn from each other.
That's great. Just waiting for Geeta. I know she was keen to hop on to thank everyone for their participation, because I believe this is the last session of the 2 days conference. So yeah, let's just give Geeta a moment to sign off.
Yeah, I can see Felix.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much, Rachel, Donal and Bo. I have to say I'm always very inspired to hear you talk about that relationship between engagement in course material to engagement, retention, better grades. We all know that's the case, but to have that backed by data and many years of, I guess, testing to get to the right sort of mix for your courses, which traditionally are courses that students find more challenging, is always so wonderful to hear. So thank you so much for going through that with us. And I hope everyone really enjoyed that session. So as you said, that's a wrap. It's been a wonderful whirlwind 2 days for all of us, and I'm sure all of you are feeling as energized as we are, having discussed and learnt so much from each other about some of the challenges and shared challenges that we are facing as an industry. I think key takeaways that I've definitely taken away have been around student co-creation, around curriculum to help embrace some of the new areas, such as new, but actually they're not necessarily new, but they're important areas such as sustainability and EDI, but also, you know, co-creation to help increase motivation, because we do see a common post-pandemic hangover. So we need to try and work together as a community to help enrich that student and get experience and engagement again. So how can we do that? So lots of big takeaways. So in terms of a big thank you, on behalf of the McGraw Hill team, I wanted to extend a huge thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us today, but also to our wonderful panelists, our chairs, our moderators, our organisers, and of course the team at Notified, whose platform we've used for this, without whom we definitely couldn't have pulled off this event. I'm sure you'll all agree that these key conversations need to continue. You know, we're not at the end. I don't think we've, you know, made firm sort of like, this is what we're going to do. It's an ongoing conversation. And we at McGraw Hill want to continue having that conversation with you. We want to continue facilitating that conversation. So please do share any feedback that you have with us through a survey that you'll receive shortly on email, and let us know what topics you want to hear about, what kinds of discussions you want to hear about, if there are any solutions that were discussed in the sessions that you'd want to hear more about, want to see, or even if you want to speak to any of our panelist experts, then by all means let us know, and we'll make sure that we're able to organise that for you. And I guess last piece of housekeeping, I wouldn't be doing my sort of session properly if I didn't do that. So if you want to access this session content again, all you'll need to do is log back into the conference, and you'll be able to see your sessions under the agenda and under the sessions tab. I'd highly suggest bookmarking the conference tab somewhere. So in case, let's say in a month's time, you want to go back and look, or you want to look tomorrow, maybe even today or tonight, you can go back and have a look at the sessions. Equally, if you've got colleagues that didn't manage to register but are interested, by all means feel free to send them the link. We'll put that link again in the follow-up, but by all means feel free to send that out to colleagues. They can still register and still access content for up to a year in the platform, and we at McGraw Hill will be looking to extract all of the content and placing that onto some channels elsewhere, so that you can always access this all the time, even after the year's up. The slides and resources, a lot of people asked about this. That's all available in the resource center now for you, and you can find that under the home tab. Please ensure pop-up blockers are switched off so that you're able to access them. That's really important, and I kept getting that wrong yesterday. Certificates of attendance, many of you will have auto received those. Apologies once again for the formatting there. There's always something. You can access those by going back into my profile, and you'll be able to select on certificates there. So it's all there for you to access. And you can obviously also receive these to watch on demand. And lastly, but never the least, a huge thank you once again to everybody who's been part of this event, including our very important audience. And we look forward to speaking to you all very soon again. Wish you a pleasant evening and week ahead. Thank you.